my own supply chain, my own production in my own country, my own sphere of influence and sort of a trading market is going to lead to money printing. And so that's how we get to $1 million Bitcoin. Let's increase the bank lending so that they build the new factories. Let's sequester savings and do yield curve control, whether outright or surreptitiously, to fix the yield of government bonds while we inflate the supply of credit. So that's how we get to $1 million Bitcoin.
According to Hayes, the massive government spending required to support this deglobalization movement will lead to inflation and further debasement of fiat currencies. He outlines a scenario where governments use yield curve control, increased bank lending, and direct monetary injections to stimulate economic activity. This, in turn, fuels capital flows into scarce assets like Bitcoin, pushing its price higher. Hayes is confident that Bitcoin will reach $1 million before the end of the decade as global governments accelerate their money printing efforts. While the exact timing remains uncertain, he sees the trajectory as inevitable given the structural economic changes taking place.
Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space and drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks and enjoy the video.
So I think Bitcoin is leading the stock market. Obviously, we just had Nvidia earnings a few hours ago. They were kind of good. We'll see if the market wanted more out of them in terms of what they were expecting in terms of growth and margins and revenue and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I think Bitcoin leads the stock market. And so what Bitcoin is telling us is, hey, the US government is not printing as much money as we thought they would when Trump got in office. The Treasury General account has not declined that materially yet. Obviously, there's the debt ceiling dynamics. It's an open question whether Donald Trump can get his first spending bill passed. I know it's passed the sort of preliminary House committee, and now it'll have to go up for a vote in the House and the Senate. And it'll be interesting to see if the recalcitrant Republicans were like to claim that they care about fiscal responsibility, pipe up and sort of torpedo this bill, and then Donald Trump can't spend any money. So you have the Elon Musk and Doge funding all the fraud in the U.S. government spending. How big that is, we don't know. It could be as high as 1 to 2 trillion. It could be as low as a few hundred billion. Again, if that money is basically not spent, that's cash that's not getting into the hands of people in the American economy, whether they deserve it or not is not the point. They buy stuff with it, whether it's financial assets, whether it's a new car, a washing machine, go on vacation, whatever. They spend money, there's a money multiplier on it. And that money, if it's not being spent, then that reduces liquidity and Bitcoin will suffer, and so will the stock market. If people, I know your listeners and viewers are quite attuned to the geopolitics and economics, the US government is about 25% of nominal GDP in the United States. So it is the outperformance of the US economy over the past 2 to 3 years is primarily predicated on the US government spending money. And so if the US government's not going to spend as much money, because either Donald Trump cannot, because he can't get a spending bill passed, or Elon is cutting waste out of the government and not replacing it with new spending, and that's going to negatively impact risk assets, negatively impact US GDP. And therefore, I think Bitcoin is telling us that there is a severe stock market correction on the horizon, unless, of course, that spending reaccelerates. So that's sort of where I'm at in this sort of mindset. And we're at 85,000. Could we go to 75? Possibly, but I think we're nearing sort of the exhaustion point of this corrective pattern before we sort of go sideways for a bit and go higher. So at the end of the day, Trump and every other major political force around the world is preaching localism, nationalism, my country first. We're not going to rely on a global supply chain of products because, pandemic happened or we're in a fight with the other side. Therefore, we need to build things locally. And obviously, if everyone replicates the same productive capacity, that is inflationary. And it requires a lot of money because everyone essentially outsourced their productive capacity to China, which is extremely efficient at it. But now I'm going to rebuild it in my more expensive, less populated country, mostly in the United States and Western Europe. So this requires a huge amount of capital, and the private savings market doesn't have the money. It's all the foreigners who have the money. And the foreigners, China and Japan, Saudi Arabia, oil exporters, obviously don't want to basically fund people that hate them or consider them strategic competitors, or whatever euphemism you want to call it, to rebuild their infrastructure. So that savings is not going to be provided to the US and Western Europe. So they're going to have to print the money because they don't have any of it, the private savers. And so I think secularly, regardless of who is in office, this move towards my own supply chain, my own production in my own country, my own sphere of influence and sort of trading market is going to lead to money printing. And so that's how we get to $1 million Bitcoin. Let's increase the bank lending so that they build the new factories. Let's sequester savings and do yield curve control, whether outright or surreptitiously, to fix the yield of government bonds while we inflate the supply of credit. So that's how we get to $1 million Bitcoin. How fast we get there, I don't know, but I do think that this is on the horizon before the end of the decade.
During the COVID era, Democrat-led policies saw large-scale stimulus measures, and there was little effort to rein in spending. Had Kamala Harris or another Democratic candidate won, Hayes believes they would have continued this aggressive fiscal expansion, leading to even higher Bitcoin prices. In contrast, Trump and the Republicans are currently facing internal divisions over spending, creating uncertainty around how much liquidity will actually enter the system. Hayes also points out the shifting stance of Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. Before the 2024 election, Powell was cutting rates to stimulate the economy, yet now that Trump is in office, he has taken a more hawkish stance. This political dynamic adds another layer of complexity to the liquidity equation.
I think and this is probably heretical to a lot of Bitcoin people, especially those in America, if the Democrats had won the election, yes, they probably would have kept shitting on crypto companies, and that's obviously not good for a lot of people in the United States. However, they would continue printing a lot more money faster than what Donald Trump and the Republicans are doing. Not that I don't think we're going to end up in the same place, but if you take what the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk, and mimetic Doge Department advisory thing is doing, looking at all the ridiculous things that government agencies are spending, there's obviously a large amount of fraud embedded in sort of the spending patterns of the U.S. government, and that was sort of turbocharged after the COVID debacle. And you can see that the Democrats, at least in the United States, had no intention of reining that back. If anything, they were going to go even harder at spending more and more money, printing money. And you had the Treasury doing it, and you had the Federal Reserve enabling it as well. And so I believe this is in August, and at that point, it was about a 50-50, at least in my mind, a coin toss as to who would win the election. But the Democrats being the party in power, they could use the relevant government agencies to try to inject more liquidity, pump the markets, and get people feeling good on election days, and they would go and vote for the candidate Kamala Harris. Or I don't know if Joe Biden was still in the race at that point. But in any event, I think we've obviously had sort of the Trump pump, and then the realization that the money is not going to be forthcoming as quickly as it would have been if it had been a Democrat in power, because not only would they have the Treasury under their control, they would also have the Federal Reserve, because Jerome Powell and some of the Fed governors have been very vocal about their distaste for Donald Trump. And now all of a sudden, Jerome Powell has found his hawkish inflation fighting credentials when he was cutting rates in September of 2024, right before the election, when the U.S. economy was doing just fine and inflation was bottoming, if not re-accelerating. So I think it's a very curious stance that the federal chairman has now, all of a sudden, because Donald Trump is in office. All that is to say that I think the Democrats would have printed more money faster, and the Bitcoin price would be higher than it is today if Kamala Harris is in office. Well, number one, the big point I make is what can be bought can be sold. And if it's in politics, politicians buy and sell things for political reasons, not for financial ones. It's not like, maybe Trump's sons own a bunch of Bitcoin and they're going to make some money. But at the end of the day, if the United States government has like a $10 trillion unrealized P&L. It doesn't really go into anyone's pocket, but it can help you get reelected. And so if I'm sitting on, so when I buy it, there's somebody in charge when I buy it, and then the politicians change. Maybe a Democrat gets in, or a Democratic Congress, or a president in the next 4 years, and they say, oh, I've got this, I got a bunch of Bitcoin, and it's worth money. And guess what? I need to, give goodies out to the people who voted for me, and to the corporations, or whatever, however I need to spend this money. Politics is about spending money to your supporters to get votes. So I just sell it. So all of a sudden, what everyone thought was a great idea when they were buying becomes this like sort of democracy. Oh, I can't pronounce the fucking name. The Greek guy with the sword over the market, and you're worried. Oh, will or won't they sell all this Bitcoin that they have bought? So yeah, it's a short-term sort of price appreciation because they bought some Bitcoin, but long-term now you're just afraid of when they're going to sell it, how they're going to sell it, and it's just become a political nightmare that you can't really predict. And so I say, well, if you want sort of Bitcoin to be strategically important to the United States and its goal of, keeping the dollar hegemony, well, instead of maybe you're using gold or U.S. Treasuries as a reserve asset, how about we construct a system where Bitcoin is the neutral reserve asset, and then the trading currency is the U.S. dollar? And that's what I went into this post about, explaining my idea about how they could construct this. And I think that would be a lot more long-term positive for Bitcoin, because now you have people settling trade in Bitcoin, people saving their national surplus in Bitcoin, and people using it as a currency for global trade, which obviously has a much bigger bid on the price. And we know that because look at the U.S. Treasuries. The amount of Treasury debt has gone up. I think it's something like 8% CAGR over the last 30 years, or something insane. But people still buy it because you have to. You need to save in a dollar yielding instrument because of the way the system is constructed, which has allowed the U.S. to essentially print all this money and buy stuff from the rest of the world. And then the altcoins will follow, I think, but investors are getting a lot more specific about what they are investing in. We had different cycles of applications on these decentralized networks or these app chains. And so we want to see user growth. We want to see revenue. We want to see tokenomics that benefit us as the token holder relative to early investors. And so every single cycle, we get a little bit more specific. And obviously, only the best-in-class application accrues value. And it's much harder for just your random shitcoin to 100x just because it has the right buzzword in the name. So again, it's going to require much more effort on the part of investors to choose an application that actually has real fundamentals. It's not just going to be, sprayed a bunch of money and guess what? My worst performing token was only up 10x, best one was up 1,000x. Like that was 2017, 2020. That's not happening again.
Hayes envisions a scenario where Bitcoin could play a strategic role in global finance. He suggests that instead of relying solely on U.S. Treasuries or gold, Bitcoin could become a neutral reserve asset for global trade settlement. This shift would create persistent demand for Bitcoin, further solidifying its role as a global store of value. However, he warns that if governments begin acquiring large amounts of Bitcoin, it could introduce political risks. The same governments that buy Bitcoin as a reserve asset might later decide to sell it for political reasons, leading to market instability. Thus, while government adoption could boost Bitcoin's price in the short term, it also creates new uncertainties. Please like and subscribe.